I never thought I'd be the kind of person to snoop. I've always prided myself on trust, on giving people the benefit of the doubt, especially the ones I love most. But that afternoon, with the house quiet and the kids at school, a nagging feeling tugged at me. My husband, Dan, had been distant for weeks. Later nights at work, cryptic texts he'd swipe away when I walked in. I told myself I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the unease. So I sat down at my laptop, opened our family cloud account to check some old photos for a scrapbook project, and that's when I saw it. Nested in a folder labeled Work Docs was a file that didn't belong, a PDF confirmation for a Caribbean cruise. My heart skipped as I clicked it open. The booking was for 2, under Dan's name, with a departure date just 3 weeks away. But it wasn't my name beside his on the passenger list. It was my sister, Emily. My younger sister, the one I'd practically raised after Mom passed, the one who'd cried on my shoulder through every heartbreak. My stomach churned as the words blurred on the screen. How could they do this? How long had this been going on? I scrolled through the folder, my hands trembling, until I found a photo attached to an email receipt. It was them, Dan and Emily, standing on a beach somewhere, his arm around her waist, her head tilted against his shoulder, both of them smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. The timestamp showed it was from last summer, during a business trip Dan had taken. I'd been home, juggling the kids' schedules, thinking he was halfway across the country closing deals. Instead, he'd been with her, my sister, my blood. I should have screamed. I should have thrown something, called them both, demanded answers. But instead, a strange, cold calm washed over me. It was like stepping outside my body, watching myself sit there, staring at the screen as the world tilted. My mind raced, piecing together little moments I'd dismissed. Emily's sudden interest in helping out with the kids, Dan's compliments about her cooking during family dinners, the way they'd laugh a little too long at private jokes. How blind had I been? I closed the laptop with a deliberate slowness, my breath shallow. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just sat there, letting the silence of the house wrap around me like a cocoon. Part of me wanted to confront them that very second, to see their faces when I laid out the evidence. But another part, a darker part I didn't recognize, whispered to wait, to plan, to make sure that when I struck, they'd feel the weight of their betrayal as deeply as I did now. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water, though my throat felt like sandpaper. As I sipped, I stared out the window at the backyard where Dan and I had built a life together, where we'd celebrated birthdays, hosted barbecues, promised forever. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, countless memories, and now this. I thought about our daughter, Lily, who adored her Aunt Emily, and our son, Max, who looked up to his dad like he was a superhero. How would I tell them? How would I protect them from this wreckage? My phone buzzed on the counter, snapping me back to the present. It was a text from Emily. "Hey, can I come over later? Need to talk about something." My grip tightened on the glass. Talk about what? Was she finally going to confess? Or was this just another lie, another excuse to get close to Dan under my roof? I typed back a quick "sure," my fingers steady despite the storm inside me. I didn't know what I'd say when she arrived, or how I'd keep this icy calm from cracking. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let them play me for a fool any longer. As the minutes ticked by, I felt a shift in myself, a resolve hardening like steel. I'd spent years putting everyone else's needs before mine, but not anymore. Whatever Emily had to say, whatever excuses or truths she'd bring, I was ready to face her. And Dan? He had no idea the storm that was coming. But as I stood there, waiting for the doorbell to ring, a single question burned in my mind. How far was I willing to go to make them pay? As I waited for Emily to arrive, the house felt like a pressure cooker, every tick of the clock amplifying the tension in my chest. I paced the living room, tracing the familiar paths over the rug where the kids had played, where Dan and I had curled up watching movies on quiet nights. Those memories stung now, tainted by the image of him and Emily on that beach, their smiles a silent mockery of everything I'd built. I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. His arm around her, her head on his shoulder. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. They'd stolen my trust, my peace, my family. I stopped by the fireplace, staring at a framed photo of us from our 10th anniversary. Dan's grin was wide, his hand resting on my hip as we stood under a canopy of string lights at a little bistro downtown. I'd felt so loved that night, so certain of our future. Now, I wondered if he'd already been drifting away even then, if Emily had been in the picture longer than I feared. My fingers hovered over the frame, tempted to smash it, to let the glass shatter like my heart had. But I pulled back. Not yet. I needed to hold myself together until I knew everything. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible one, the rock for Emily after Mom died. I was barely a teenager myself when I started helping with her homework, packing her lunches, comforting her through nightmares. Dad worked long hours, and I stepped into the gaps, even when it meant sacrificing my own childhood. My track meets, my art projects, my quiet dreams of being noticed, they were always overshadowed by her tantrums, her neediness, her endless dramas. I remember one specific moment, my high school graduation, when I'd earned a small scholarship for college. I was so proud, clutching that certificate on stage, scanning the crowd for Dad's face. But he wasn't there. He'd stayed home because Emily had a meltdown over a failed test. My achievement didn't matter. It never did. And Mom, before she passed, had always doted on Emily too, calling her my little sunshine while I was just expected to be okay, to not need as much. I told myself I didn't mind, that I was stronger, that I could handle it. But deep down, it carved a hollow space in me, a wound that never quite healed. Every time I tried to shine, to be seen, someone else's light was brighter. My efforts, my sacrifices were invisible. And now, here I was again, unseen, unvalued, betrayed by the two people I'd poured my heart into. I thought about Dan's excuses over the past year, those late nights at the office, the weekends he'd spend unwinding with vague plans. I'd believed him because I wanted to, because I trusted him. And Emily, her sudden closeness, her offers to babysit, her lingering hugs when she said goodbye. I'd thought she was finally growing up, finally appreciating me. How naive I'd been. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs, but I'd swept them under the rug of denial. Now they formed a trail straight to this moment, this unbearable truth. My reflection in the window caught my eye as I passed by, a woman with tired eyes, clenched jaw, shoulders hunched under an invisible weight. I barely recognized myself. When had I become this person, so quick to doubt, so full of simmering rage? But maybe this anger wasn't new. Maybe it had been there all along, buried under layers of patience and selflessness, waiting for a reason to surface. And now it had one. A big, ugly, undeniable reason. The doorbell chimed, sharp and sudden, snapping me out of my spiral. My pulse raced as I smoothed my shirt, forcing a neutral expression. I didn't know what Emily would say if she'd confess or play innocent, but I knew I couldn't let her see how much this hurt. Not yet. I needed her to think I was still the same old me, the sister who always forgave, who always understood. But inside, that sister was gone. As I reached for the doorknob, my mind churned with possibilities. Was she here to admit everything, or to dig the knife deeper with more lies? I took a breath, steadied myself, and opened the door to find out. As I opened the door, Emily stood there, her face a mix of hesitation and forced cheer, clutching a reusable grocery bag like it was a shield. Her eyes darted to mine for a split second before dropping to the floor, and that fleeting avoidance told me everything. She knew I knew, or at least, she suspected. My stomach twisted, but I plastered on a tight smile, stepping aside to let her in. The air between us felt thick, charged with unspoken questions I wasn't sure I was ready to ask. "Hey, sis," she said, her voice too bright, like she was auditioning for a role in a play where everything was fine. She set the bag on the counter, pulling out a bottle of cheap wine and a box of cookies, some half-hearted peace offering, I guessed. thought we could use a little treat. You've seemed off lately." Her words hung there, probing, testing the waters. I wondered if she was daring me to say it, to call her out right then and there. I nodded, busying myself with grabbing glasses from the cabinet, my back to her so she couldn't see the tremble in my hands. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," I muttered, keeping my tone even. But inside, my thoughts were a storm. 12 years with James, Dan as I'd called him since the day we met in college, flashed through my mind like a montage of broken promises. I'd given up so much for him. My dreams of being an artist, of traveling the world with a sketchbook in hand, had been shelved for his career ambitions. I'd supported him through law school, working double shifts at a diner to pay the bills while he studied late into the night. I'd moved across states for his job offers, uprooted our life each time with a smile because I believed in us, in his vision for our future. And where had that gotten me? Standing in a kitchen that felt more like a prison, pouring wine for the sister who might be the reason my marriage was crumbling. I turned back to Emily, handing her a glass, and noticed how her fingers brushed mine a little too long, a gesture that used to feel sisterly but now felt like a taunt. I pulled away, sipping the wine to cover the bitterness rising in my throat. Every memory of her growing closeness with Dan over the past few years took on a darker shade now. The way she'd laugh a little louder at his jokes, the way she'd linger after family dinners, offering to help him with the dishes while I put the kids to bed. I'd thought it was harmless, even sweet, my sister finally bonding with my husband. How wrong I'd been. "You and Dan have been spending a lot of time together," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I kept my voice light, casual, but inside my heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. Her face froze for a fraction of a second, a deer caught in headlights before she recovered with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh yeah, just helping out when you're busy," she said, swirling her wine like she hadn't a care in the world. "He's been stressed, you know. I figured I'd keep him company sometimes. No big deal." Her nonchalance was a punch to the gut. No big deal. As if stealing pieces of my life was just a casual hobby. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but I bit my tongue. If I pushed too hard now, she'd clam up, and I needed more than vague answers. I needed proof, certainty, something solid to hold on to when I confronted Dan. I forced a chuckle, playing along, though every word felt like swallowing glass. "Right, stressed. He's always got something going on." I watched her closely, searching for cracks in her facade, but she just nodded, taking a long sip of her wine. The silence that followed was suffocating, each tick of the kitchen clock amplifying the tension. I thought back to all the sacrifices I'd made, not just for Dan, but for her too. All those years I'd put her needs before mine, and now this. The betrayal wasn't just a crack in my marriage. It was a chasm tearing through every relationship I'd ever valued. As we sat there, pretending to chat about meaningless things, my mind raced with what to do next. Should I dig deeper, risk exposing how much I suspected? Or should I wait, gather evidence, and strike when I was sure? The answer eluded me, but one thing was clear. This charade couldn't last. I glanced at Emily, her smile as fake as the calm I was projecting, and realized the next move wasn't just a choice. It was a declaration of war. But would I be brave enough to make it, or would I crumble under the weight of confronting the two people I'd loved most? I couldn't sit across from Emily a second longer, her forced smile and hollow laughter gnawing at my nerves. After she left that night, the silence in the house felt heavier, pressing down on me until I thought I'd suffocate. I paced the living room, replaying every word, every glance, trying to piece together a plan. I needed more than suspicion. I needed undeniable truth. But confronting Dan or Emily outright felt like stepping onto a minefield. I wasn't ready for the explosion. Not yet. That's when it hit me. There was someone else who might be hurting just as much as I was, someone who deserved to know the truth as much as I did. Marcus, Emily's fiancé. The idea of reaching out to him felt reckless, even dangerous, but it clung to me like a burr. Marcus and I had never been close, just polite nods at family gatherings and the occasional small talk about sports or the weather. He was a quiet guy, steady, the kind of person who seemed to balance Emily's chaotic energy. But now I wondered if he'd noticed the same subtle shifts I had. Emily's excuses for late nights, her sudden errands that stretched into hours. Had he been as blind as me, or was he already piecing things together? The thought of dragging him into this mess made my stomach churn, but so did the idea of facing it alone. I needed an ally, someone who could understand the sting of betrayal from the inside. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand, staring at Marcus's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button, doubt creeping in. What if he didn't know anything? What if he thought I was crazy, stirring up drama for no reason? Worse, what if he confronted Emily and tipped her off before I was ready? My chest tightened at the thought, but then I remembered the way her laugh had faltered last night, the way she'd avoided my gaze. I couldn't keep playing this game of pretend. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. "Marcus, hey, it's me," I said when he answered, my voice shakier than I wanted. There was a pause, a rustle on the other end like he was shifting something around. Then his calm, even tone came through. "Hey, everything okay?" His question was simple, but it carried a weight I hadn't expected, like he sensed something was off. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I need to talk to you, in person. It's important. Can you meet me somewhere? Like, now?" Another pause, longer this time, and I could almost hear him processing, weighing whether to push for details over the phone. Finally, he agreed, suggesting a quiet coffee shop halfway between our places. I hung up, my heart racing, already second-guessing myself. What was I even going to say? How do you tell someone their future spouse might be destroying your life? And theirs. At the coffee shop, I arrived first, clutching a manila envelope I'd stuffed with the little evidence I'd gathered. A screenshot of a text thread between Dan and Emily I'd glimpsed on his phone. A receipt for a hotel I'd found in his jacket pocket. Nothing concrete, but enough to raise questions. Marcus walked in a few minutes later, his broad shoulders hunched slightly, his face unreadable. He slid into the seat across from me, and for a moment, we just sat there, two strangers bound by a shared dread neither of us wanted to name. "So, what's this about?" he asked, his voice low, almost cautious, like he was bracing for a blow. I took a deep breath, sliding the envelope across the table but not opening it yet. I needed to gauge him first, to see if he was as shattered as I felt. "Marcus, I'm going to be straight with you. I think something's going on between Emily and Dan. Something they're not telling us." His jaw tightened just for a split second, but it was enough. His eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to me, and I saw it, a flicker of pain, of recognition. He didn't flinch or deny it, which told me more than words ever could. Had he suspected it too? Or was this the moment his world started to crack, just like mine had? I opened my mouth to say more, but he held up a hand, stopping me. "Before you show me whatever's in there, I need to know. Why are you telling me this? What do you want out of it?" His question hung between us, sharp and loaded, and I realized he wasn't just asking about evidence. He was asking about revenge, about justice, about whether I was here to burn everything down. And in that moment, staring into his guarded eyes, I felt the first threads of an alliance forming. A bond forged in shared pain and a hunger for answers. But could I trust him with the full weight of my suspicions, or would this meeting be the spark that ignited a fire I couldn't control? My heart thudded against my ribcage as Marcus's question lingered in the air, sharp and probing. Why was I telling him this? What did I want out of it? I leaned back in the coffee shop chair, the bitter scent of espresso mixing with the tension between us, and I felt the weight of my own uncertainty. Did I want revenge, or was it just the desperate need to not be alone in this storm? I studied his face, searching for a crack in his stoic exterior, something to tell me he was as broken as I was. His hand rested on the table, inches from the manila envelope, but he didn't reach for it. Not yet. That hesitation told me he was afraid of what might be inside, just as I'd been when I first stumbled across those damning clues. "Marcus, I don't know what I want," I admitted, my voice raw, barely above a whisper. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. I see the way Emily's been acting, the way Dan dodges questions. It's eating me alive, and I thought, maybe you've noticed something too. Maybe you're feeling the same thing I am. Oh, my words hung there, fragile and heavy, and I saw the faintest tremor in his jaw, a sign that I'd struck a nerve. For a long moment, he didn't speak, just stared at the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. Finally, he exhaled, a slow, controlled breath, and met my gaze. "I've had my doubts," he confessed, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Little things. Late-night texts she wouldn't explain. Weekends she'd disappear for work. I told myself I was being paranoid, but hearing it from you—" He trailed off, his eyes darkening with something I recognized. Betrayal taking root, spreading like wildfire. Seeing that pain mirrored in him made my chest ache, but it also ignited a spark of resolve. We weren't just two people hurt by the same betrayal. We were two people who could do something about it. I pushed the envelope toward him, my fingers trembling. "This is what I've found so far. It's not much, but it's enough to make me question everything. I think we deserve the whole truth, don't you?" He hesitated, then nodded, his movements slow as he opened the flap and pulled out the contents. The screenshot of Dan's texts to Emily, the cryptic messages about meeting up, the hotel receipt with a date that lined up with one of Dan's supposed business trips. Each piece of paper seemed to weigh him down further. His silence was suffocating, but I could see the storm brewing behind his eyes, the same storm that had kept me awake for weeks. "We can't confront them yet," he said finally, folding the papers back into the envelope with a precision that felt almost too calm. "Not until we have more. Something they can't deny or twist. If we go in half-cocked, they'll just gaslight us, make us feel like we're the crazy ones." His words mirrored my own fears, and I nodded, though part of me ached to storm into Dan's office right then and demand answers. Marcus leaned forward, his tone shifting to something harder, more determined. "But there's something else. Emily mentioned a cruise next month, a work retreat with some of her colleagues. I wasn't invited, of course. Now I'm wondering if Dan's going to be there." The word cruise hit me like a punch. I remembered Dan mentioning a trip too. Something about networking, but he'd been vague, brushing it off when I pressed for details. My mind raced, piecing it together, the audacity of it burning in my chest. A getaway, a perfect cover for whatever they were hiding. "If they're both on that ship, we've got our chance," I said, my voice tight with a mix of anger and anticipation. "We need to be there. We need to see it with our own eyes." Marcus's eyes narrowed, a glint of something fierce flashing through them. "Agreed, but we can't just show up unprepared. I've got a friend, a private investigator. He owes me a favor. He can dig into their finances, their schedules, maybe even get us on that cruise without tipping them off. And if there's anything else, hidden accounts, secret messages, he'll find it." The idea of a professional peeling back the layers of their lies sent a thrill through me, but also a shiver of dread. What if we uncovered more than we could handle? "Then we've got a plan," I said, feeling the weight of our alliance solidify. "We get the evidence, we get on that cruise, and we confront them where they can't run. No more hiding, no more games." Marcus nodded, a grim determination settling over him, but I could see the undercurrent of fear in his eyes, the same fear gnawing at me. What would we find on that ship? Would catching them in the act heal us or shatter us beyond repair? As we shook hands across the table, sealing our pact, I felt a fire ignite within me, a hunger for retribution. But beneath it, a whisper of doubt lingered. Were we ready for the storm we were about to unleash? My pulse raced as the cruise ship loomed before us, a towering beast of steel and glass cutting through the ocean under a sky bruised with the threat of a storm. Marcus and I stood at the railing of the lower deck, the salty wind whipping at our faces as we scanned the crowd of passengers boarding with their bright smiles and carefree laughter. Somewhere among them were Dan and Emily, oblivious to the predators lurking in their midst. The weight of our secret plan sat heavy in my chest, a volatile mix of anticipation and dread. We'd managed to secure tickets through Marcus's investigator friend, who'd also slipped us copies of their cabin assignments and a detailed itinerary of the ship's events. Every detail was a weapon, and we intended to wield them with precision. I adjusted the brim of my oversized hat, a flimsy disguise that did little to ease the paranoia prickling at my skin. What if they spotted us before we were ready? What if they saw through our carefully crafted charade? Marcus, sensing my unease, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding me for a fleeting moment. "Relax," he murmured, his voice low enough to blend with the hum of the crowd. "We've got the upper hand. They don't know we're here. Let's keep it that way until the right moment." His confidence was a lifeline, but beneath it, I could hear the undercurrent of his own nerves. We were both walking a tightrope, balancing between calculated control and raw, unchecked emotion. Our first move was subtle, a whisper of psychological warfare. Over the next 2 days, we played the part of casual strangers, lingering just close enough to Dan and Emily to be noticed, but not recognized. I'd catch a glimpse of Dan's profile at the buffet, his hand brushing Emily's as they laughed over something trivial, and my stomach would churn with a bitter cocktail of rage and hurt. Marcus would tense beside me, his knuckles whitening as he gripped a glass of soda, but we'd exchange a look, a silent agreement to hold our ground. Instead of confronting them outright, we dropped hints like pebbles tossed into a still pond, waiting for the ripples. I'd mention a vague memory of a hotel receipt in passing while near their table at dinner, loud enough for Dan to overhear, and I'd watch his posture stiffen, his fork pausing mid-air. Marcus would casually ask a staff member about a private event near Emily's cabin block, his voice carrying just far enough for her to glance over, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Each small jab built the tension, a slow simmer that I could feel heating up inside me with every forced smile and bitten-back insult. I wanted to scream, to tear through their facade right there in the dining hall, but Marcus's earlier warning echoed in my mind. We needed them rattled, not defensive. So we kept pushing, layering on the pressure with every cryptic comment and lingering stare. By the third night, I could see the cracks forming, Dan's forced laughter, Emily's nervous glances over her shoulder. They were starting to feel the noose tightening, even if they didn't know who held the rope. Our final strike was planned for the ship's gala night, a grand event in the ballroom where every passenger would be dressed to the nines, clinking champagne glasses under chandeliers. It was the perfect stage for a public reckoning, a spectacle they couldn't escape. Marcus and I spent hours in our cabin, rehearsing our approach, mapping out every word and movement like generals plotting a battle. The investigator had unearthed one final piece of evidence, a photo of the two of them, taken by a fellow passenger on a previous work trip, their intimacy undeniable. It was the ace up our sleeve, and we intended to play it at the height of the night, when the room was fullest, their guard lowest. As the gala hour approached, I stood before the cabin mirror, smoothing the lines of an elegant black dress I hadn't worn in years. The woman staring back at me looked fierce, but inside I was a trembling mess. What if this backfired? What if I couldn't hold myself together when the moment came? Marcus knocked on the doorframe, his own suit crisp and sharp, a mask of determination on his face. "It's time," he said simply, holding out the printed photo like a loaded weapon. My heart thundered as I took it, folding it into my clutch, the paper crinkling under my grip. We stepped into the corridor, the distant sound of music and chatter pulling us toward the ballroom, toward the inevitable showdown. But as we approached the glittering entrance, I caught a glimpse of Dan through the crowd, his arm around Emily, and a sudden icy doubt gripped me. Were we about to destroy everything, including ourselves, in front of 100 strangers? The ballroom glittered like a dream, a sea of sequins and satin swaying under the golden glow of chandeliers. Laughter and the clink of champagne glasses filled the air, but beneath the surface of the gala's elegance, my heart pounded like a war drum. I clutched the folded photo in my purse, its edges digging into my palm through the thin fabric, a constant reminder of the bomb I was about to detonate. Marcus stood beside me, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. We were predators in a room full of prey, but the weight of what we were about to do pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. Could I really do this? Could I shatter Dan and Emily's carefully curated lies in front of all these strangers? We moved through the crowd with practiced ease, blending in with the other passengers, my black dress and Marcus's sharp suit rendering us invisible among the finery. I caught glimpses of Dan near the center of the room, his tuxedo pristine, his smile wide as he toasted with a group of older couples. Emily clung to his arm, her red gown a striking contrast to her pale, tense face. Even from here, I could see the cracks we'd started to carve over the past few days. Her forced laughter, the way her eyes darted around as if expecting a ghost to emerge from the shadows. They were rattled, just as we'd planned, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I wanted them to feel the ground crumble beneath them, just as I had when I first discovered their betrayal. Marcus nudged me subtly, his voice a low murmur against the hum of the crowd. The talent show's starting soon. That's our window. Every eye in the room will be on the stage. My stomach churned at the thought. The ship's talent show, a light-hearted event meant for laughs and applause, was listed on the itinerary as the gala's centerpiece. It was the perfect moment for our strike, a public unmasking they couldn't run from. We'd already coordinated with a sympathetic staff member to ensure our performance would be slotted in, a last-minute addition under a vague description. The photo wasn't the only weapon in our arsenal. Marcus's investigator had compiled a digital slideshow, a devastating montage of evidence, hotel receipts, email exchanges, and that damning picture of their intertwined hands on a beach they claimed was a business trip. It was all loaded onto a USB drive, burning a hole in Marcus's pocket. As the announcer's voice crackled through the speakers, calling passengers to take their seats for the show, a wave of nausea rolled through me. I gripped Marcus's arm, my nails digging into his sleeve. "What if this goes wrong?" I whispered, my voice trembling with doubt. "What if they turn it around on us, make us look like the villains?" His eyes met mine, steady and unyielding, though I saw a flicker of uncertainty there too. "They've already made us the fools," he said quietly. "This is just us taking back the narrative. We're not the ones who lied, cheated, and stole. They are." His words steeled me, but only just. My legs felt like jelly as we moved toward the edge of the stage area, blending into the crowd of onlookers while the first act, a middle-aged man crooning a shaky ballad, took the spotlight. Each performance ticked by like a countdown to doom. A child's clumsy dance routine, a woman's heartfelt poetry reading, every act brought us closer to our moment. My palms sweated, my breath shallow as I rehearsed the words I'd say when our turn came. I'd start with a simple introduction, a facade of innocence, before the screen behind us flared to life with the truth. Marcus would handle the tech, ensuring the slideshow played without a hitch. We'd timed it perfectly, 3 minutes of undeniable proof, ending with that photo, their faces frozen in a moment of intimacy they couldn't deny. I could already imagine the gasps, the whispers, the way Dan's charm would crumble under the weight of 100 accusing stares. But as the act before ours wrapped up, a shiver of dread crawled up my spine. I spotted Dan and Emily near the front row, their heads bent close, whispering intently. Had they sensed something was off? Did they know we were here, waiting to strike? Marcus followed my gaze, his expression darkening. "They're nervous," he muttered, almost to himself. "Good." But my heart wasn't so sure. What if they bolted before we could act? What if they had a plan of their own to counter ours? As the announcer called our fake stage name, my throat tightened, and I stepped forward on unsteady legs, the weight of every eye in the room pinning me in place. Was this the moment we'd reclaim our dignity, or the moment we'd lose everything? As I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinded me for a moment, a harsh glare that felt like it was peeling away every layer of armor I'd built up over the past months. The crowd's murmurs faded into a dull hum, and my heart thundered so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the microphone I clutched in my trembling hand. Marcus stood just off stage, his silhouette a reassuring shadow as he gave me a subtle nod. This was it. The moment of truth. I forced a smile, my voice wavering as I introduced us as a pair of passengers with a special dedication to share. The words tasted bitter, a lie masking the dagger I was about to plunge into Dan and Emily's perfect facade. The room was still, a sea of curious faces staring up at me, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. I glanced toward the front row where Dan and Emily sat, their expressions a mix of confusion and unease. Emily's fingers tightened around Dan's arm, her crimson dress a stark splash of color against the monochrome of my rage. I could almost feel their tension, the unspoken question hanging between them. "What is she doing up there?" My smile widened, cold and calculated, as I gestured vaguely to the screen behind me. We've prepared something to celebrate the connections we've made on this journey," I said, my voice steadier now, fueled by the fire of betrayal that had simmered in my chest for far too long. Marcus moved silently, connecting the USB drive to the projector. The screen flickered to life and the first image appeared, a seemingly innocent snapshot of a beach at sunset. The crowd cooed, assuming it was a sentimental travel memory. But then the next slide clicked into place, a close-up of linked hands, Dan's familiar watch glinting in the light, Emily's delicate bracelet unmistakable. A murmur rippled through the audience, confusion edging into realization. I watched Dan's face drain of color, his easy charm replaced by a mask of pure panic. Emily froze, her grip on his arm turning to stone as the slides continued. Hotel receipts, time-stamped emails, each piece of evidence a hammer blow to their lies. The gasps grew louder, whispers turning to audible shock as the final image landed, the photo from my purse, now blown up for all to see, capturing their stolen moment of intimacy on that same beach. The room erupted into a cacophony of murmurs, heads turning, fingers pointing. I didn't need to say another word. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. My voice broke as I stepped back from the mic, the weight of my actions crashing over me. I'd done it. I'd stripped them bare in front of everyone, just as they'd stripped me of trust and dignity. But the victory felt hollow, tainted by the ache in my chest. Was this really closure, or had I just opened a deeper wound? Dan lurched to his feet, his face a storm of fury and desperation, shouting something I couldn't hear over the din. Emily buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, whether from shame or anger I couldn't tell. Security moved in quickly, their dark uniforms cutting through the crowd as they approached the couple. I watched, detached, as they were escorted away from their seats, Dan's protests growing fainter while passengers stared, some with pity, others with undisguised contempt. Marcus joined me on stage, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, grounding me as the weight of 100 judging eyes shifted to us. Had we gone too far? Were we the heroes of this story, or just as cruel as the ones we'd exposed? As the talent show stuttered to a halt, the ship's captain appeared, his expression grim as he addressed the crowd, promising a swift resolution to the disruption. I barely listened, my gaze locked on the empty seats where Dan and Emily had been. They were gone now, but the fallout was just beginning. Whispers followed us as we left the stage, passengers parting like a sea, their stares a mix of awe and accusation. Marcus murmured that we'd hear from the ship's authorities soon, but my mind was already racing ahead. Legal battles loomed on the horizon, defamation claims, maybe even countersuits. Had I just destroyed my own life in pursuit of revenge? As we stepped into the quiet corridor outside the ballroom, a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. I'd won this round, but at what cost? And what would happen when Dan and Emily fought back? The corridor outside the ballroom felt like a different world, a muted echo of the chaos I'd just unleashed. My pulse still raced, each beat a reminder of the storm I'd stirred. But the adrenaline was draining fast, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion. Marcus walked beside me, his silence heavier than any words he could have spoken. I could feel the weight of his thoughts, the unspoken question of whether we'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My hands trembled as I shoved them into my pockets, trying to steady myself against the growing tide of doubt. Had I really thought this through, or had I let vengeance blind me to the consequences? We found a quiet spot near the ship's railing, the night air cool against my flushed skin. The ocean stretched endless and black before us, a mirror to the void I felt inside. I leaned against the metal, gripping it until my knuckles whitened, as if it could anchor me to some semblance of control. Marcus stood a step behind, giving me space but not straying far, his presence a quiet comfort in the aftermath. "They'll come for us," he said finally, his voice low, almost swallowed by the sound of the waves. "Dan's not the type to let this slide. And Emily, she'll play the victim card, make us look like the monsters." His words stung, not because they weren't true, but because I hadn't let myself consider them until now. I turned to face him, searching his eyes for some hint of judgment, but found only concern. "Do you think we went too far?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid of the answer. He hesitated, his jaw tightening as he looked out at the horizon. "I think we did what we had to, but it doesn't mean it feels right." His honesty cut deeper than any lecture could have. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and turned back to the water. The hollow victory I'd tasted on stage was turning sour, replaced by a gnawing fear of what came next. Legal threats, public humiliation, maybe even losing what little piece I'd scraped together. Had I traded one prison for another? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, hurried and purposeful, echoing down the deck. I tensed, my grip on the railing tightening as a ship officer approached, his uniform crisp and his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, sir," he began, his tone clipped but polite. "The captain requests your presence in his office. Immediately." My stomach dropped, a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. Marcus shot me a quick glance, his eyes narrowing with unspoken worry, but he nodded to the officer. "Of course," he said, his voice steady in a way I envied. As we followed the man through the dimly lit corridors, each step felt like a march to judgment. What did the captain want? Was this about Dan and Emily, or had our stunt broken some unspoken cruise policy? The captain's office was small but imposing, all dark wood and nautical decor, a stark contrast to the chaos of my emotions. He stood behind his desk, his weathered face set in a grim line as he gestured for us to sit. "I'll be direct," he said, his voice low and firm. "Your actions tonight have caused significant distress among passengers and disrupted the event. We've had complaints, multiple, and I've received a formal grievance from the couple in question." My heart sank further with every word, the weight of consequence settling like a stone in my chest. I opened my mouth to explain, to justify, but he held up a hand to silence me. "I'm not here to debate intent. I'm here to ensure this doesn't escalate further. They've requested a private meeting with you, under supervision, to discuss the matter." A private meeting? The idea sent a shiver through me, memories of Dan's anger and Emily's tearful manipulations flashing through my mind. I glanced at Marcus, whose expression had hardened, his protective instinct kicking in. "And if we refuse?" he asked, his tone challenging. The captain's eyes narrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Refusal could complicate things, for all of you. We're in international waters, and my authority here is final. I suggest you consider your options carefully." His words hung in the air, heavy with threat and implication. My mind raced. Did I face them, risking another emotional ambush, or stand my ground and face whatever punishment the captain deemed fit? As we were dismissed with a curt nod, I felt the walls closing in, the ship's endless corridors no longer a refuge but a cage. What choice did I really have, and how much more could I lose before this was truly over? The dim light of the captain's office lingered in my mind as Marcus and I stepped back into the narrow corridor, the heavy door clicking shut behind us with an ominous finality. My chest felt tight, as if the walls of the ship were pressing in, suffocating me with the weight of the choice ahead. A private meeting with Dan and Emily, under supervision, sure, but still a confrontation I wasn't sure I could handle. Their faces flashed through my memory. Dan's cold, calculated glare and Emily's feigned vulnerability, a weapon sharper than any knife. I rubbed my palms against my sides, trying to shake the nervous energy buzzing through me, but it clung like damp air. Marcus walked beside me, his steps measured, but I could sense the tension radiating from him. "We don't have to do this," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble as we made our way toward the upper deck. "We can refuse. Let the captain deal with the fallout. You've been through enough." His words were a lifeline, an out I desperately wanted to grab, but something in me resisted. Refusing felt like running, like admitting defeat after everything I'd fought for. I'd come this far, unmasked their lies, exposed their betrayal in front of an audience. To back down now would be to let them win, to let them rewrite the narrative with their crocodile tears and half-truths. I stopped walking, leaning against the cold metal wall of the corridor, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through me. "If we don't face them, they'll spin this however they want," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. "They'll paint us as the villains, Marcus. I can't let that happen, not after everything they took from me." My words hung between us, heavy with the past I couldn't escape. Years of trust shattered, a marriage turned to ash, and the bitter taste of betrayal that still lingered on my tongue. I looked at him, searching for reassurance, but his expression was unreadable, a storm of his own brewing behind his dark eyes. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, frustration etched into every line of his face. "I get it. I do. But walking into that room, it's like stepping into a trap. You know how they are. Dan will try to intimidate you, and Emily. She'll twist everything until you're drowning in guilt. Are you sure you're ready for that?" His question cut deep, piercing through the fragile confidence I'd built over the past 6 months. Was I ready? The truth was, I didn't know. But I'd spent too long being the one who cowered, the one who swallowed her pain in silence. That version of me was gone. Or at least, I wanted to believe she was. We resumed walking, the silence between us thick with unspoken fears, as the corridor opened onto the deck. The night air hit me like a slap, sharp and salty, grounding me in the moment. I glanced out at the endless expanse of ocean, a black mirror reflecting the turmoil inside me, and felt a strange calm settle over my bones. 6 months ago, I'd been a shell of myself, broken by their deception, clinging to fragments of a life that no longer existed. Now, I stood stronger than ever, thriving in a career I'd rebuilt from scratch, finding peace in the freedom I'd clawed my way toward. I was no longer just a victim. I'd become a lighthouse, guiding myself out of the darkness, illuminating a path to a brighter, unshackled future. Marcus's voice broke through my thoughts, softer now, tinged with something like pride. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. But let's take tonight to think it over. Clear heads, right?" He forced a small smile, and I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. As we stood there, the idea of a celebratory cruise, one he'd proposed earlier to mark how far I'd come, flickered in my mind like a distant star. A chance to escape, to breathe, to reclaim joy after so much pain. But before I could linger on the thought, a shadow moved near the edge of the deck, a figure watching from the darkness. My breath caught, every nerve on edge as I squinted to make out who it was. Dan? Emily? Or just a stranger caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? The uncertainty gripped me, a cold hand around my heart, as I realized that even in my newfound strength, the ghosts of my past were never far behind.